OHC stands for Open Healthcare Network. We are a team of enthusiastic developers and contributors committed to building open technology, especially in the healthcare domain.
The ratio of number of doctors and nurses in India is not comparable to the actual number of people who's required. The more time we are able to save, that's the time they can spend with the patients.
OHC built Care, which is our open source flagship product. We identify hospitals and connect them to the closest care center. The doctors or the specialists get a complete picture of how the patient is doing, and if the doctors feel that they need to be moved, then they have a referral system through the software that tracks the journey of the patient.
I'm not doing the miracles, but I'm just giving some tips of life-sustaining techniques. So that's how driving me and our team more and more.
Early on, we were very fortunate to have active participation from healthcare professionals. They're the ones telling us what to build, how to build.
The engineer showed me how I can contribute on GitHub. I am writing the special issue of I need this button there so that I can have better accessibility of shifting a patient. Within 1 week, I see a link to the finished product. That is when I really saw the magic.
We have more than 400 people contribute from around the world. The developers were very interested. They were like, okay, there is a request from a doctor. We have to go solve it for him. Then they pick up the issue, then they actually go and build it.
We have seen the quality of code improve immensely with Copilot. So it's almost like everybody's gotten their own personal assistant.
I just have to say what I want in a few comments, and it's able to write out the entire thing for me. It's like another human helping me out. Having everything in open source from day one actually improved the trust.
When OHC came in, suddenly I realized that the small decision I make, the small issue that I file, now it's impacting millions.
This healthcare transformation created a very significant positive impact to every citizen of India.
Please welcome the CEO of GitHub, Thomas Dohmke. Good morning. Oh, let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Yes, so great to be here. I'm Thomas, and I'm like you, a developer. And what you just saw in the video embellishes the power of the open source community here in India. Your commits change lives, your commits save lives. Now, you may know this is my first time as GitHub CEO in India, but it's not my first time all up. You can see by this picture that I took in Bangalore, I haven't changed at all. This was 16 years ago. My wife and I were invited to our wedding. We loved our time here. We almost moved here. Wanted to move here into this beautiful country. And on a personal level, India is very special to me ever since. But even more so, India and you as the open source community, you are the future. Yes. India right now is at the nexus of something truly monumental. You have an opportunity right now that no other country has, because developers like each of you are leading the way. By 2027, India will overtake the United States as the largest software developer community on earth. Yes. This alone signals prosperity ahead. You're driving economic growth, you're accelerating human progress. But you know, the thing is, open source is about to get a whole new engine, like transitioning from a gas car to an electric vehicle. Because at the same time, your developer population is booming, the age of AI has begun. In June 2020, we launched GitHub Copilot, the first ever Copilot, the world's first at-scale tool that writes code for software developers. And today, it's the most widely adopted AI developer tool on the planet. Software developers like you have embraced AI faster than any other sector of the workforce because you get it. Copilot lets you skip the things that you don't want to do so you can spend more time with the things that you do. And developers are already 55% faster when using Copilot. Those are gains that free up hours in your day and days in your year. So now you can see India's developer community is booming, AI is taking off, and you're at the epicenter of a radical transformation. In a way that no other country on earth can claim, India's open source ecosystem is on the brink of a great convergence between the world's large population of developers and the newfound possibilities of artificial intelligence. This will supercharge your economy. It will fuel developer demand, but more importantly, this convergence will make your lives easier, so much easier. And trust me, I know what it feels like. I know you need your lives to be a little bit easier. Because after all, you have a lot on your plates. I love this image. You know, the world depends on open source. The world depends on you. You know, every single one of you. And that's a big world to keep spinning. And that whole tower will collapse like a tower in Jenga without your participation. So today I want to talk to you about this convergence and how you can be empowered by AI to build and code in natural language, in your human language, so you can focus on what you love, you can focus on your creativity. And of course, it all starts with open source, it all starts with you. Let me show you what I mean. Now, as most of you know, for the last 80 years, in order to build software, you had to speak, understand, and interpret the highly complex, sometimes nonsensical language of a machine that we call simply code. You know it, I know it. The greatest barrier to entry is the complexity of this abstraction layer. And it's also why shipping stuff is so damn hard. I mean, look at this, for instance. Some of you may know this ancient relic. It's called COBOL. It's a programming language that was invented during the late 1950s when the US president was Eisenhower. And yet, still today, the largest financial institutions from Mumbai to London and New York are all built on this. They're all still running it on mainframes, probably some of them maintained by you on a day-to-day basis. With Copilot, this is all going to change. Machines can now speak, understand, and interpret nearly every major human language. Hindi, Portuguese, Bahasa, German, Kannada, you name it, right? As soon any person will be able to program a machine and build new software with a simple written prompt. For open source developers, this is nothing short of revolutionary. You shouldn't have to speak English to code, to create or to participate in open source. The barriers to entry are crumbling, and we're intending to crumble them. And this is also the cause behind our latest creation called Copilot Workspace, our new Copilot native developer environment. Workspace takes you from the issue to the pull request instantly in natural language. And in many ways, Workspace was built with the spirit of open source in mind. You can share your workspace with the community and collaborate, and every maintainer can see your thought process because you're all doing it in human language. Well, but don't just take it from me. It's always easy to believe what's on the slide. I've brought one of our hubbers. His name is Karan, and he will show you Copilot Workspace in real life on this stage now. Welcome, Karan.
Thanks,
Hey, it's so good to see you.
It's really nice to see everyone over here. Now, one of the things that Thomas and I both love, apart from just building code, is also building with Lego. So today, let's see if we can build something with both code as well as Lego live right over here on stage. Okay, great. So now I want to actually build a 3D Lego brick on a web page. So I have a new JavaScript file here. And like a good developer, I'm going to start with a comment. So I'm going to say, create a function to create a Lego brick. And then I'm going to say function draw Legos. All right, nice. So you see that with the context of the comment, Copilot understood my intent, and it's able to help me write this code, which I can further iterate on by myself or even look at some of the alternatives that Copilot actually gives me. All right, now this is the OG Copilot, right? And it didn't really offer me a way to interact with the code, like ask it more questions or give it some more instructions. So last year, we launched GitHub Copilot Chat, which provides you a natural language chat experience right here within the editor. So let me ask Copilot Chat to write the whole thing for me with a 3D Lego brick on a web page. So I'm going to ask it, write JS code to generate a 3D Lego brick on a web page. So nice. So you can see that it's giving me some of the steps as well, helping me learn as to how I can do this. And it's giving me a lot of detailed steps, including the code over here, which it's generating and streaming me live here into the editor. So you can see it's using the open source 3JS library, and also gives me a brief of what the code does, right? This is nice. So what I can do is I can just, inspect the code, see what's going on over here, and, even bring it right into my editor over here, and I can continue iterating on it. Now, I want to show you something very interesting. If you have noticed very keenly, you would have seen a small little mic icon here, right, in Copilot Chat. Now, I can use this to talk to Copilot. So I'm going to ask Copilot to just explain the code in this openlegobrick.js file over here. And I am going to do it in Hindi. So let's try. This is live. मुझे इस प्रोग्राम के बारे में 2 वाक्यों में बताइए. It understood. And amazing. You see, it's also replying to me in Hindi, and not just that, it will also give me a voice response of what's happening, which I think is probably not audible. So amazing. It actually, understood what I was saying in voice. It was able to write that in Hindi and also give me a response back over here in Hindi itself. How amazing is that, right? I'm sure, most of you will love that and you'll use that. All right, so you'll see that there are quite some of, iterations that I have to do to actually make all of this work together, right? And, once I've done all of that, this is how my Lego brick would look like. So a nice 3D Lego brick where all of the things will come together and, it's going to look good. Now, there's still a fair bit of coding involved to kind of get to where I want everything to be, right? And, I want to really be able to kind of channel my creativity and make it into reality. I want to be able to convert my task straight into code. And that's where GitHub Copilot Workspace comes in. And here, I'm not just starting with code, but I'm actually starting with a task I want to be accomplished, right? So let's go see over here. I'm going to just start a new session over here, and I can begin with a task. Now, let's see. I have a 3D Lego brick, and I want to do something out of it. So let's say I want to build a Lego house out of it. So that's what I'm going to say, Copilot, saying that stack bricks in the shape of a Lego house. That's my task that I want to be accomplished. And now you can see that Copilot generates a detailed specification of how this can be implemented. And it also gives me what are some of the proposed changes to make this happen. It also then generates a plan on how this can be accomplished while also referencing some of the relevant files where the changes have to be made. Copilot then also helps me implement some of these selected files by making changes to the relevant code base. Now, remember that with Copilot, you are always in control. So you can make edits to the specification, to the plan, or even the implementation over here. GitHub Copilot Workspace also comes with a complete development environment in the cloud using GitHub Codespaces, even with a terminal, which you can actually see running live over here in your browser. Now, Copilot Workspace also gives you a live preview of your app running in GitHub Codespaces, which would make it easier for really you to see what's happening and what Copilot did. Now, let's see if Copilot indeed helped build the Lego house. So I'm going to open up the preview that I have over here, and amazing. You can see that it just stacked all of the bricks, and with my intent, my task of building this Lego house, it's accomplished all of it that I really want. And now that's really the power of GitHub Copilot Workspace, where I was really able to go from idea to code to software, all while working in natural language of what I really wanted, right? How amazing is that? Thank you so much. Back to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Karan. How amazing is this, huh? Coding as simple as the thoughts in your mind. And now you can see how natural language is now the most powerful thing you have, right? And that's why I'm wearing this shirt today. Karan has one, and I have good news. You're all going to get one later. And because of these natural language capabilities, because of Copilot, I'm confident that India will not only have the largest developer community soon, but it will also have the largest, most vibrant open source ecosystem on the planet. So now, Karan, let's do some fireside chatting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thomas. That was really insightful on everything that you mentioned about the Indian developer ecosystem, etc. And for all of you as well, you can share any questions that you might have with Thomas. So on your badges, on the reverse, you have a QR code for the session Q&A. So you can scan that QR code, and you can ask any questions that you might have for Thomas. And we're going to select a few of them and bring it up over here. All right? Okay, great. First of all, thank you. Thanks so much, Thomas. Like I mentioned, very, very insightful on the developer community, in India, right? But before actually getting to that, I noticed in your intro slide, as well as in multiple places, you're known as Ashtom on the internet, right? that actually took me quite a while to figure out that that's an anagram, and is it a hacker name for Thomas? Like Thomas, Ashtom, etc.
Yeah, it's all the letters in a different order, but still says Thomas.
Interesting. So, well, can you let us in a little bit on your journey on what it was like to become the CEO of GitHub?
First of all, Karan, thank you so much for your awesome demo. I think you had the better job on stage than I did, because you were allowed to code. And I think, that describes how I got where I am today. It was my passion for coding. I grew up in East Germany, in East Berlin, in the late 70s and through the 80s. And finally, when the wall had fallen in 1989, I went into a store and bought a Commodore 64 and started to learn code. And back then, it was all books and magazines and computer club, right? There was no internet, no forums, no GitHub, no Stack Overflow. We could just ask questions. So what was often very frustrating. It was very frustrating, to figure out how to do things. But I also think, that made me the nerd that I am today. And then through my journey, I had different jobs, always building stuff with software until I finally landed at Microsoft in late 2014, moved from Stuttgart, Germany to Seattle in the United States, worked in Microsoft's developer division. And in 2018, we decided at Microsoft we would love to buy GitHub, and we convinced the founders to sell it to us. And as the deal came to a close, I joined GitHub, and about 3 years ago became the CEO. But really, if you trace that backwards, all the decisions I made always led me, into the direction of doing something with software for software developers.
Awesome, awesome. That's really inspiring to know about your journey as well, Thomas. Now, talking about open source, right? That was something which you emphasized on a lot on your presentation as well. Now, there is a notion that India consumes a lot of open source, but maybe not contributes, which we know that there is a lot that's happening. So, what are generally your thoughts on it, on the consumer economy of open source and like the contributor economy?
I think it's a false notion, to say India is only consuming open source. There's many open source projects here in Bangalore and elsewhere in India. In fact, if you think about the open source collaboration system, right? You often don't even know who that person is. All you know is their GitHub handle, mine is #Tom, and there is it doesn't say where I'm from, what religion I have, what nationality, what title, where I'm sitting in some org chart, that none of that matters in open source, right? On a Sunday evening, somebody sends me a pull request. I don't care, who that person is. All I care is that thing that we have decided to collaborate on with, which is code and natural language, the description that you put in your pull request or in your fork that you're sending to me. And I think that open source collaboration model is actually better than anything else we have on this world. We have millions of developers around the world playing together in the largest team sport on earth, right? Like there's no other thing on this planet where millions of people collaborate across any boundary, and including here in India.
Amazing. That's definitely nice, and I know that there are a whole lot of us developers, who kind of are a lot on GitHub, collaborating not just for code, but even for things like project management or documentation and things like that, which is really nice from a collaboration. Now, I know there are students out here in the audience. So where are you folks? Woo! Oh, okay, great. So, Thomas, of course, India is home to a large number of computer science and engineering students who would majorly contribute to a lot of the software development and the global workforce itself, right? So how will tools like GitHub Copilot and AI itself really impact students and academicians on their upskilling and learning journey?
I think it will make it so much easier, to drive your own learning journey at your own pace. And you probably, you are old now, too old to start your journey again at age 6. But I think, the next generation of developers will, I hope, start in elementary school when they're 6 or 7, when they're already fascinated by either Super Mario or Minecraft, depending on what gaming ecosystem they choose first. Often that's how kids get into coding, that they play computer games and then they want to build their own games. They want to create something themselves. And today, if you want to try that, you have to know English, right? Because most of the documentation out there is in English, most of the ecosystem communicates in English. And B, you need people that can help you. And if you're growing up in a household where your parents don't have technical skills, it's really hard to get started, right? Because if you're frustrated, if you're stuck, where do you go to, to ask questions? And with Copilot, we will democratize access to this, because now whether you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, or whether you're 30 years old or 50 years old, if you want to build something cool, you can do so, and you can get started with Copilot. You can ask the question, and then if it cannot create the code for you, it will probably give you some instruction of what you can explore next, and then you can always say, well, tell me more. And you demoed it in Hindi, and then it works in so many other languages, so it will also free people from learning English first before they can start coding. And I love telling the story. I have 2 sons. The oldest is 12, and he often sends me text messages. Yesterday, while I was doing a press interview, his message was, "Why does Java suck so much?" and he learned Python in the last few years, and in parentheses, he said, I'm learning it anyway because why not? And then he sent me a screenshot, from Copilot with the Python code, and below that was the Java code that Python had, that Copilot had translated, for him, and the Java code was 3 times as long, right? But you see the idea here, right? You can take code, you can ask Copilot a question, and then it helps you with explaining that code, transforming that code, finding bugs, so helping you with infinite patience, because, let's face it, parents don't have infinite patience, and your bosses don't have either.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I mentioned many a times about Copilot, it's how, not just a pair programmer, but a really patient pair programmer, where you can ask a lot of questions and then learn, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're taking up a few questions from the audience, and there's an interesting one over here. So someone asked, how do you envision the role of AI evolving in software development over the next 5 years, and what new features or tools can we expect from GitHub to support this evolution?
Great question. Thank you so much for getting the thread started. I see Karan's iPad is filling with audience questions. I think, as we look through the next few years, what certainly will happen is that we will have what we call agents. Now, an agent is not scary. It's simply describing that you're not just asking the model a question, get an answer. You're actually asking the model to loop, through multiple chains of thoughts until it can solve a problem for you. But like one simple example, one feature that we launched in March is what we call code scanning autofix. You know how you have probably a code scanning tool in your company and it finds security vulnerabilities, or you have a linter and every time you want to commit something, it tells you to fix your spaces and your parentheses in your head, thinking, why don't you just do that yourself? If you find the errors, just fix the errors for me. Well, an agent can do that. An agent can not only find the security vulnerabilities like a SQL injection or cross-site scripting, it can also propose a fix for you, and you can look at that fix, you can try it out, and then you can merge it together with your pull request, right? No more waiting for a coworker on the other side of the world to tell you that you could have just done all that, while they were still sleeping. So we will have more of these agents that support us through our journey as developers. Now, that doesn't take away, your job as a software developer, whether in open source and commercial software development. It will add more things to your toolbox, right? We have always moved up the stack. We moved from punch cards. I think when I was in my mom's office in the 80s, there were punch cards in her office, right? And that was nothing else than just controlling the transistors in the computer. And then we moved to assembly language and, BASIC. And I learned Pascal on my first PC. And then I don't know what you had, Python, Ruby. Nowadays it's Rust. And we moved from creating it all ourselves to hundreds, if not thousands, of open source libraries that are all in our stack. If you're starting a React app today, you probably have immediately 1,000 libraries in your dependency graph, right? So we're just moving up the ladder, we're moving up the stack because we have to, right? The systems we're building, even the open source components we're building, are so fucking complex. Sorry for saying that, but like we're managing so much code, right? We're managing so much code today, and we need a Jarvis, an Iron Man's Jarvis in our ear, and you showed it kind of like with voice already, that helps us to navigate all that complexity.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely what you mentioned about Iron Man Jarvis really, goes back to all of those where, we were so fascinated with Iron Man, really interacting with AI and everything else. There is another interesting question which I'll paraphrase with a couple of other questions. And it's about how can Copilot help with security when it comes to the code itself?
So I already mentioned autofix, which I think is one of the more complex scenarios that's currently in preview, and hopefully we will GA this later this summer. But the most simplest piece in security is actually just explaining security vulnerabilities to the developer, right? You get a scan result from somewhere, maybe you see it in a VS Code extension, and now you're wondering what is this? What should I do here? So you can just ask the question, explain the security vulnerability to me. In fact, you can even go and say, well, how would an attacker exploit this, right? And all of a sudden, you see how a SQL injection actually is dangerous and what input variable, what input parameters the attacker would feed into your code to exploit. And often it's that first step of having the AI explain to us, to help us in our learning journey to understand why this is so important for our bosses, for our customers. And then you can obviously also ask it to fix it in VS Code, in VS or in JetBrains, and just say, well, show me how to fix this error for me. And the cool thing is, you can explore, more possibilities with the AI there. You can always say, well, maybe I can refactor this function. Maybe I can use an open source library to make that code even simpler. So we're shifting left. We're moving security all the way into the editors. You can find those issues much sooner than in production. And we have all been in this moment where it's Friday afternoon and you see, a security alert popping up somewhere, and all of a sudden you have to update all your servers instead of heading into the weekend, right? Nobody wants that life anymore. So we are going to make our lives much easier.
Nice.
Hopefully. Yeah.
It does. Right. Okay, so there's a few interesting questions coming here, Thomas, specifically about your journey. So there's someone who's asking, what was really your hardest part of your developer journey, and how did you kind of cross that or get there, etc.?
I think a few situations come to mind. Certainly when I was young, it was this frustration. It's 8 p.m. and you cannot possibly solve this error message. You cannot figure out how to solve this before the internet. And you're just frustrated. And when I was young, I didn't realize that the best idea is actually to just shut off and go to sleep, because you have always better thoughts in the morning and a fresh mind. And you actually learn while you're sleeping and during a REM sleep phase, right? So even that, there's a biological reason that we say, well, it's better to sleep on it and have fresh thoughts in the morning. But that's, overcoming this frustration. And I think we still have that today, right? You're trying to solve a problem in code and you can't, by the love of it, figure out in which file you have to make which change to fix the side effect, or why is your cluster running hot even though you didn't change anything, and all of a sudden you're at 80% load and not at 20%, and then you realize, well, it's something in the file system that's blocking I/O, and it's finding that needle in the haystack. I think that's the most frustrating part in the developer's journey. I think the other thing, and I'd say I learned that too late in my journey, is that I realized that you never stop learning. Like, as kids, you're like, oh, school is finally over, I'm grown up and never have to write a test anymore. And then you start in university and it's like, oh shit, I'm in this again. And I have to take exams. And then you're done with university and now you're in your job and you're like, cool, now I can only code all day, right? And I never have to ever take a test again. And that's true, but we actually have to learn over and over again, right? The best craftspeople, right? Those that make the most beautiful art, that play the most beautiful music, the best woodworkers, even the best architects, what they do is constantly learn and constantly practice. Any concert you've ever been to with people on stage, musicians, they rehearse. The Rolling Stones have been rehearsing for 50 years. They've been also playing concerts, but in between they rehearse. And the same is true for us as developers. We have to practice. And that's also why I'm not concerned about AI, because the craftsmanship, that all of you have as developers, AI is not going to replace this, because it doesn't have sentience, it doesn't have that ability to evolve over time by doing things better and more beautiful.
Absolutely. I think your last insights, Thomas, answered a bunch of questions that folks had around Copilot and how developers would be in that. Okay, now there's, switching gears a bit, there's a few questions around open source. And, summarizing some of them, folks want to know that how do you just build a healthy open source community and, get more contributors to help support your project?
This feels like a question that requires a breakout session with lots of insights from open source maintainers. But I think, the gist of it is that you have a heart in running this open source community, right? You have a beautiful README file that describes, how you expect the project to work. Maybe you have some contributor agreement that you document, or you just set the tone of how you want others to engage with you. You're treating it, like your baby, that requires investment. It's not throwing open source code out there and then, they will come and they will contribute back to you. And for you, the only thing that's left is merging the pull request. That never works. And you see a lot of also these abandoned projects. I have some. That don't get any love into it anymore because you just lost interest in it. So I think that's number one. You have to put your passion and your energy into it, and then the other maintainers will realize that your heart is in there and they will want to work with you. I think a big question that always comes up is the sustainability of open source, and we at GitHub for 5 years, 6 years now have a product called GitHub Sponsors, where you can create your sponsor page and have others, donate money to you. Funny story is I got introduced by somebody here in Kerala the other day, and then I realized I'm actually sponsoring him through, I think he was in our README project or something like that. And so sponsors is one way, to make that life as an open source maintainer sustainable. We have programs like the Accelerator, where we help open source maintainers to become, professional so maintainer, I guess, open source starters to become professional maintainers. And we have things like, the GitHub Stars and the GitHub Funds, where we offer, other ways of engaging with GitHub, or the way of funding startups, right? And if you think about, the creator ecosystem, most developers don't want ads, right? So ads are not on GitHub. We won't bring ads to GitHub. So what's the better way? Well, the better way is to build a startup around your open source project. And there's many successful examples of this. Next.js with Vercel comes to mind, or Elasticsearch, HashiCorp. There's many other such examples where it gives you an opportunity to not only build something beautiful in a community, but also that community then becoming your initial set of customers for your startup.
Amazing, amazing. Now, interestingly, Thomas, there's a whole, people in the audience who are very interested to know more about your experience in India. So people want to know, how is it, being here?
Yeah.
What do you like the most about, being here and things like that, especially after, the very famous picture that you showed at the beginning of your slide. So any experiences or anything that would be, a very key thing that, you'll have as a memory?
The first thing I have to start with is the one experience nobody allows me to have is driving a car. And I always want to drive, and in 2008 it was my wife, and now it's my team telling you, Thomas, you can't drive here. And I'm like, no, this is exciting. I want to be part of this, this entropy of driving here in Bangalore. I think it's fascinating to come back to Bangalore after 16 years. So much has changed. It's a much more modern city. Now you have a metro. You can. I think Seattle still hasn't more than 1.5 line opened. While I think you have 5 lines now here in Bangalore. Is that right? The city is moving. There's so much energy. Last time I arrived here in 2008, I arrived at the old airport, and then I took off from the new airport, and the road wasn't even finished. And so we had to take some dirt road to get to the airport. And in the meantime, it's one of the most beautiful airports I have seen. And I remember arriving in the luggage hall on Sunday, and it has all these elephants graphics on the side. And it's this energy, in India that is always has fascinated me. And it reminds me now of software, right? In software and AI, there's something new every single day. It feels like in Bangalore and elsewhere in India, there's also something new every single day. Things are moving forward, and people are excited about building a better society.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thomas, that actually reminds me of what you said. Many of us know that every time you're using JavaScript, there's a new library. So every time when you're going out over there, there is something new happening in the city, in the country. So there are again a few bunch of questions about about what you're able to help do, and then drive at GitHub, and then also lead such an organization which is creating such a big impact, not just with developers, but the organizations they are working for and everything else. So so someone is interestingly asking, how does the day in the life of a GitHub CEO look like?
It's a lot of talking, a lot of meetings. Luckily, today they're all in person. Tomorrow I will fly back, and then on Friday I will be back on many Teams calls in my home office. GitHub is a remote first company. Of the 3,000 employees, I'd say 2,900 something are probably working from home today, and a few are coming to our hubs, to brainstorm in front of a whiteboard, to have an offsite, or I think it's happy hour on Thursdays as well. So it will be tomorrow, I guess. But it's managing the creativity of our employees. It's talking with them about what's coming next. It's planning through the next semester. We plan in 6-month cycle together with our mothership Microsoft. It's figuring out what are the biggest problems, the biggest rocks in our way, and ultimately, and that's why I love my job so much, is we have this saying at GitHub: is we put the developer always first. in every product we design, in every process we think, even how we operate internally. GitHub builds GitHub on GitHub. Even our HR policies, our legal text, all that is in a GitHub repo, which is pretty cool because you can go into Copilot Enterprise and ask questions about the vacation policy, or you can ask questions about shortening a URL or doing chat ops in Slack and things like that. So it's this, this mission that we have to accelerate human progress through developer collaboration that starts, with developers and with all of you. And that's the most fun part of my job, is meeting with developers and talking with them.
Awesome. In fact, one of the things that you mentioned about how at GitHub we work a lot within the GitHub ecosystem and everything else as well, right? So there are a few questions actually related to that, where folks want to know how can non-programmers like photographers, people who are content writers, etc., leverage GitHub as well as Copilot and AI in their daily jobs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whether you're a photographer or whether you're a product manager, you can collaborate in projects through non-code primitives, like GitHub issues, GitHub wikis. You can contribute to a project by reporting a bug, or just trying it out and changing the README file. Often, it's those little things that in open source projects make all the difference, because the polish, is noticeable by everybody. And then Copilot unlocks, this whole new world and we have seen this happening with photographers, with product managers, with, as I said, students or, women through Code Without Barriers, just installing the Copilot. And you can even start with the Microsoft Copilot if you want, because that also speaks code and ask the question of how could I get started with creating a web page, right? If you're a photographer, maybe you want to put all your photos on your own web page, and you can say, what's an easy way for me to do that? And it might recommend a commercial service, or it might just give you the HTML. I have demoed, building a snake game. If you had a Nokia phone, 20 years ago, you may remember that. You can do that in HTML and JavaScript. You don't have to have any coding experience. You only need to know a little bit of how to copy code from the chat window into the editor. And while you're doing that, you're learning, right? This is kind of like, in my head, I'm comparing this to, giving somebody a guitar, and they probably are just trying it out, and they have seen it somewhere, and then they might, have questions of how do I, play a C or an F, and then you can ask Copilot to do that, and you don't have to have a technical background to get started. But of course, you have to have, the motivation and the patience to get into the matter. You have to, at some point, understand code, because code is deterministic. That's the language of the machine. Human language is non-deterministic, right? You and I can both say the same sentence and mean something totally different. So you have to also still learn code. That isn't going to go away in most of the complex systems that we want to build.
Awesome, awesome. So there are a couple of, again, questions and themes, Thomas, around, how active are you still as a developer? Do you kind of still go and contribute to open source repos or write code, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they don't let me touch any GitHub production code, so I can't calm your nerves down. I'm a developer, but I have little time, and I definitely don't want to, be on the on-call rotation every night. Not that I don't enjoy that, but because I would probably take forever for me to find, the issue, the needle in the haystack. I'm, often finding time on weekends to code with my kids. We love playing Lego, but we also love coding together. I have my own open source projects. It's very little time. Often it's just, merging the Depender-bot pull requests and to keep my open source libraries updated, and so that I don't have to do that when I'm coming back to a project. I have a couple of apps. One is, where I enter all the flight numbers of all the flights I've taken. So, when I'm flying out tomorrow, I will enter the Qatar flight number, and then it shows me, the tail number, the license plate of the plane, and so can kind of figure out, have I been on that exact plane before, and is it a 777 or an A350, and so I can kind of like, track of what flights I've been on, and so that's a project I have. That's closed source because I'm embarrassed by the code. It's like old Swift. I have a project that exports all my workouts into a Git repository on GitHub, so, on my iPhone, whenever I go running or walking or whatnot, it writes a CSV file onto a GitHub repository. That's actually open source. You can try it out yourself and install it on your iPhone through test flight.
Awesome. And that's available on Ashtom?
Yeah, it's ashtom/hatch, and hatch is like health app data Git exporter.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Great. So there's, one other question, Thomas, around can Copilot really be fine-tuned on custom code base so that it's more personalized to your own code base and gives specific answers to a code base?
That also sounds like a great breakout session, so I try to keep myself short. I see the timer already ticking down. So there's multiple ways we achieved that today. The original Copilot actually always had local context in the editor. It was using everything above the cursor and below the cursor, but also adjacent tabs. And if you think about that, as the prompt window is limited in size, that's actually a quite complex topic, as you have to figure out what parts of the file to use to give Copilot context. But that's what creates that magical experience when you're auto-completing code in an existing file. It knows your coding practices. It even knows about open source libraries. It knows whether you're camel casing it or underscoring it, variable names and whatnot. So that's number one. We are doing that behind the scenes today, prompt engineering, prompt crafting, whatever we call that. In chat, you can now say add workspace, and it uses your whole Git repository, your file system, that VS Code workspace is in, and you can ask questions about all the files. And if you think about, imagine you're cloning a Git repository of some open source project. The biggest challenge that you actually have to overcome in the beginning is figuring out what's in which file, right? Like, what do I have to modify? Where do I write unit tests? And there's an anxiety in our heads that is, I'm doing it wrong, and then the maintainer is going to yell at me that I messed up their project, right? And so you can say add workspace, and it uses a local index, a vector index to give you an answer. And so that's local context that kind of happens automatically. We're also working on actual fine-tuning the model, so that's going to come in public preview later this summer, and it's going to work as you might imagine. You pick a couple of repos on GitHub and you say you want to fine-tune the model that we're using for code completions on that code base, and after a few minutes to hours, depending on how big your code size is, you get your custom model, and then VS Code will just route all the requests for that project to that custom model.
Awesome, awesome, great. I know we are almost close to time, so thank you so much for answering asking the questions. Thank you, Thomas, for answering. I have one last question for you. So it's very, very inspiring to see that India is on track to surpass the US as the largest developer community on GitHub by 2027, right? So one final question, last question for you is, what's your really vision for India and your message for developers, all those who are here as well as joining in live on many different live streams? What's your message to developers?
I want to quote Gandhi, which is there's this quote and that is from him that says the future depends on what you do today. Right? You are building your own future here in India today, and you should be excited about this future. We have new technology that's at least as impactful as the internet, maybe as the PC revolution, maybe even as the industrial revolution. And at the same time, have a huge number of software developers, over 200,000 or so graduates every year that come out of computer science and related disciplines. You have a lot of skills, and those things are converging and allowing you to build India into the leadership position in AI. I think the cricket game between India and the United States is later this week. You want to win, right? And so you also want to win in software. And so it's on you. It's on you to win in this age on AI. Let's get it started today.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Thomas. It was really great, very, very insightful to know about your journey, about what Copilot can do, about the ecosystem in India, about developers, students, and a whole lot more thing.
Thank you so much, Karan, for managing and moderating this fireside chat. He had no Copilot to summarize all the questions.
Yes, I wish probably that's a feature request. but thank you so much, Thomas. But I have one last thing. Let's take a selfie with everyone.
With everybody.
Yeah. So, great. Can we bring up the selfie stick, please? All right. And if you all can stand up, you can be a part of the selfie.